Good day. Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, was absolutely terrible until the clones arrived. Truly, the clone troopers were the saving grace of that god-awful movie. For me personally, I didn't like the prequels that much, mainly because I felt the story had already been told and we didn't need all this background lore. However, in the year 2005, I was proven wrong. You see, ladies and gentlemen, in 2005, we got the Republic Commando game! Truly one of the great first-person shooters of all time, and it still wows audiences today in 2025, 20 years later. Well, to go along with that game, we got a book series called Star Wars Republic Commando. Now, here's the thing. As the 2000s wore on, I stopped really being an EU fan because I didn't like where Star Wars was going. But I kept reading them Republic Commando books because not only are they some of the best Star Wars books ever, they are also some of the best books of all time. And today, we're going to take a look at the one that started it all.
Star Wars Republic Commando was a video game that featured the epic adventures of Delta Squad, a four-man squad of clone commandos that went on harrowing missions of great justice. When I bought the game, I also picked up the strategy guide. And in the first couple pages of the strategy guide, I saw the first part of Chapter 1 of a Republic Commando novel. The partial chapter ends with the statement, "You will be taking control of Delta Squad, and the adventures of Omega Squad will continue in hard contact." According to some older research, Delta Squad was owned by LucasArts, so there was not an easy way for a writer to use those characters. After picking up the novel, I was able to blast through it in about 2 days. And I was somewhat disappointed. I felt the novel was rather slow-paced, and that it was dull. However, in the intervening time, I have actually come to appreciate the novel more and more. So with that, let's crack her open and take a look. The story opens up on Geonosis and is told from the first-person perspective. It goes through the insanity and uncertainty of that first battle and ends with the viewpoint character Darman listening to his squad being killed while he mans an E-Web. The novel does not pull any punches when it talks about war and the death of comrades. The squad for Republic Commando Hard Contact is introduced over the following chapters. You have Niner, the tough but fair sergeant, Phi, the funny man, a Tin, the stoic dude, and Darman, the simple man trying to make his way through the universe. They are tasked with infiltrating a separatist base in order to stop the Seps from creating a virus that will wipe out all of the clones. The planet they're going to was originally a farming world that exported some super tasty bark, apparently. The farmers of the world are indentured to the Trade Federation and live lives of privation due to the Trade Federation's draconian policies. The main goal of the plot is another major difference from the game. In the game, you have a standard woohoo explosion concept of shoot everything that moves. Whereas in Hard Contact, Omega is basically the space SAS. They sneak around and get all the elements in order, and then, and only then, do they blow everything up. The novel introduces a new Jedi character named Etain Turmerkin. She is a Padawan of limited skills that shows the Jedi are not all win-the-game characters. The main villain for the novel is the rather generic, but oftentimes hilarious, Gez Hoken, a Mando merc so shitty that the only posting he could get was on a back rocket world of subsistence farmers. He is still a mercenary and is still a major threat to the Omegas. The plot for the novel is an interesting hybrid of old-school Star Wars and more modern, morally gray late-period Star Wars. The villain and concept are pure old school. You got an evil merc that is oppressing the population, a desperate mission to destroy a potential superweapon. The characters and the way the plot is resolved is pure late period. The plot shows just how frightening and difficult a mission like this actually is. Sure, in the old days, Luke and company would have wrapped this up in a chapter, but for the Commandos, every day is a nightmare, and they live in fear of making one final fatal mistake. Hoken, while somewhat funny, is still a total sociopath, and is still quite scary due to his abilities. The novel also shows in full detail what the clones feel about being clones. They are human first and foremost, and even though they have been indoctrinated, they still know what they are and what they have been created for, and they are still psychologically scarred by their training. The novel also gets across the concept that the men of Omega Squad are brothers. The landing does not go as planned, and Darman gets separated from the squad. The squad does not just shrug their shoulders and move on, rather they agonizing over the missing Darman, and when they get reunited, you get hit right in the proverbial feels when Atten gives Darman a man hug. All of the Omegas are fleshed out, and all four are quite endearing, and you really come to care about them as the novel progresses. The novel shows that the Jedi are not in any way ready for the Clone Wars, and just because you slap someone with a rank does not mean that they are in any way ready for it. When Darman is separated from his mates, he meets Attain, and initially Attain mistakes him for Hoken and attacks him. Attain is untrained to a degree, and is scared, and is completely stomped by Darman. The Jedi are powerful, but they are not Supermen, and they can still be taken down by means other than Force. Attain's interactions with Darman are nothing short of amazing, are some of the best writing in this novel as a whole, and her interactions with Omega Squad are also quite endearing as well. This novel is also much more slower paced than the game, and it is much more of a character study than it is an action novel, and that is likely why as a teen I didn't enjoy it as much as I do today. If you want something that's action-packed, this ain't it. And really, if you look at the rest of the Republic Commando series as a whole, that also isn't altogether that action-packed. The writer, Karen Traviss, actually understands that commandos are meant to be sneaky snakes that shoot people in the back, not launch a major frontal assault. Now, there are action-packed moments throughout the series, and there are action-packed moments in this novel, with one of the coolest being Niner blowing up a comm station with a mining droid filled with explosives. But these moments are rare. This novel also lampshades the typical hero concept. The people of this planet are held under the thumb of Gez Hoken. Hoken has a militia filled with complete scum, and they push the population around a lot. And during a militia attack on a farming community, Darman attacks and kills an entire militia squad single-handedly. But, unlike with previous novels, everyone is pissed, as that only brings more heat upon them. Despite this novel being more morally gray than previous Star Wars books, it is still filled to the brim with some good old-fashioned hero stuff, and is still pretty damn entertaining. This novel also introduced Mandalorian. The Mandalorians finally become a faction with this novel's release. They actually get a society and their own language. In the past, we only knew of Boba Fett, and even then it was just the armor that he wore. And also, Boba Fett is a goddamn Mandalorian. As of Legacy of the Force, he was the leader of the Mandalorians. This novel also gives us the concept of the Mandalorian character, and we actually get to see certain bits of the Mandalorian language interspersed throughout the text. And it introduced the term "dickit" into my lexicon. And thus we get to the final element of this review. Karen Traviss. When I was deep into reading Republic Commando, I thought she was one of the very best EU writers, and really, even as of today, even though she kind of caused Halo to become not nearly as good as it once was, I still have the opinion that at least when she was writing Republic Commando, she was an absolutely excellent writer. Her characters and characterizations were second to none, and she actually figured out a way to make Republic Commando and the prequels work. With how epic the Commandos were, why didn't we see or hear of them in the original trilogy? Well, Karen Traviss has them be sneaky, and has them basically be background characters in the greater Star Wars universe, so it makes sense that they would slip through the cracks and be overshadowed by the likes of Obi-Wan and Anakin, and thus 20 years later they are completely forgotten. Hard Contact is a novel that in many respects stands on its own. It is much less dark than the other novels in the series, and the Omegas themselves are much less beaten down than they would become in the later books. It stands on the precipice of a new order of Star Wars novels, and is one that I cannot recommend enough. And so, I am General Lotz, wishing you good Rogue Squadron, and good Axis in Time, or whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.